to axonometric. We're just going to be drawing this space in here. So it's everything on the 8 metre line and above. And so you stick it down at 45 degrees. And then you have to sort of come back and you have to remember obviously what your dimensions that you're working off. I've stuck this down, masking tape on all the edges, and now I'm coming through and I'm going to sort of work up the axonometric itself. So you need a sort of a beginning plane, a ground plane. I'm going to use my beginning plane at 8 metres. And so what I'll do here is now I know that this is 11. So the spot level for this is 11 metres. The spot level for this is 8 metres. There's a 3 metre difference. We're aware of this because this is the way we've done sections and so on. So it's the same idea. So therefore I measure up 3 metres. So I go up to here at 1 to 200. I go using my 1 to 200 scale because this is done at 1 to 200. So I go up to 3 metres. I draw a line. I just sort of finish it there. I can then come over here. And on the top of this ramp is obviously going to be 3 metres. So I draw that up to there. The edge of that ramp there is 3 metres, so I draw it up to there as well. And these are some of the other lines. So that at the top of that line there, we could draw if we wanted to. We could do it very lightly because we're not going to be able to see it. But that would be 3 metres. And then we know that therefore if we were to draw over here, this is going to be 3 metres high. So we can draw that up to there, that's at 45 degrees. So now, all we do is join those two lines. And when you've got a set square and you've got a t-square together, you can actually just draw it straight across because you know it's going to be right. I've got to measure, you especially have to measure them, if you didn't have a set square, for example. And then we've got to draw that across, and that's the beginning of our first plane. So that's the front edge of the terrace. If we were to come down here, so we know this has got a spot level of 9 metres. So on that plane it's 9 metres. So that's 1 metre higher than 8. So we just draw that up to there. We know that's got to be a metre as well. Over here it's a metre. And so then we can just join those up. And we just sort of join that through. It's like exactly on that line, really. At the back of there, that would be 3 metres. So I'm just going to use the top of it just to be a bit easier. And I'll do it lightly because I know I won't be able to see it. So across the back there is 3 metres. So now I have drawn the plinth. I've now drawn the plinth that the pavilion sits on. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, so the only a little bit of a tricky bit here is obviously a ramp. A ramp's got to take you from the 8 up to 11. So we can just draw a straight line connecting those two. So if we go to the top of that platform and then bring it down, and we do the same on this side, we can start to see our ramp is in there. Can you see it going up the side there? So if we were to shade in these planes, say this one was in shadow or something, we would be able to see this plane doing something like that. And as soon as you put a bit of shading on it, it starts to pop out and you can start to really see how it's working. Obviously that would be, if the sun was up that the northern end, we know this is the north, then we'd be able to pop it out. Now the 8 metre one, because we're sitting on that plane, we can drop that shadow. So we can drop the axo. And generally you would do this on tracing paper over the top of your plane. So we just go through and I'm just dropping it down a metre. And again, then I just join them up. And so we're really starting to very quickly get a very good idea about how this plan looks in 3D. It's much easier for our head to go there. I'll just pop that up too. So we would again shade that. And remember, we shade with a 45 degree to that plane that we're looking at, in the same way that we looked at perspective in hatching last time. Okay, so the only other thing, I guess, is to make sure is that you might think about your tree, how your tree might sit in this space. So say it's like, that's a circumference in the middle. You've got a point here. That's your the trunk. And so then we can sort of say, if this is going to be a 20-metre tree, obviously we get our 1 to 200 scale rule. And then we sort of just going off, I'm going to make it 16 metres just so I get it on the paper. So you'd sort of draw that up to 16. And then we can think about the bowl or the underneath the tree, sort of how much of a gap you want to leave there. If we're going to say that you can sort of walk under it, if it's right near the ground, then you just sort of leave it. If it's a little bit higher, then you can start to move that up. Say I'm going to say that you could walk under, it's about 2 metres high. And so then the same dimension, so I've done this as a 4 metre circumference. So therefore I move up to the top where it's undercover, and that's a 4 metres. And I'm going to measure that circumference again at 4 metres. And therefore, when you draw that, you can draw another circumference there of roughly 4 metres. You don't have to worry about it behind, because we're not going to be able to see it. So we go to the edge, the tangent line, and then we bring it straight back up to the point of our tree. And so there you've done a tree in Axo. And you know, sometimes you might be able to see the trunk come through. And if you're to do the shadow, then obviously the shadow line that would be falling down from that is, if it was straight above, then it would be something like that. You'd have to work out what your shadow line is consistently. So we do the 1-to-1 ratio. So what would that be if it was 2 metres off there? So off that edge, 2 metres, and then you'd be able to sort of say that maybe the shadow line is falling that way, just over there, and you'd be able to sort of show that it was sort of coming underneath. Make sure you really got to get a bit of an idea. As long as the shadow was falling directly from the north. So you've got to work that out before you start moving around. And obviously this side would be the darker one, and you darken that side up. Obviously also if you've got an element that's sitting over here, remembering again all those things that we looked at when we're doing sections, is that your shadow line, if you've got it falling or something, if there's a big sort of wall that's coming out like that here, so we would, I mean, this is when you can start to actually design straight into that space. Once you set up your Axo, how that shadow line then might fall. Obviously, as it goes across and falls down, we can start to see how that interacts with the shadow line falling across, you know, a ramp or something. Just the other thing is, once you set up a plinth, if you're now working out, say, where this pond is, work it out by using exactly the same idea that we did previously. So now we just bring up the pond 3 metres. At the moment, the pond is sitting on the 8 metre ground plane. So we've got to lift it up and put it on the same plane as the plinth. It's the same plane as the pavilion. So again, it's just like what we did here. Let's lift it up, and you'd have to lift up the pavilion as well. So we get that there, and then we just lift it up to 3 metres. We lift that up 3 metres. And so now we have, you know, our pond. And we'd rub out those lines. So we've lifted it up to the same level. So it's a little bit tricky. Yeah, I'm sure you'll get it once you have a go at it. That's it. That's all there is to an axo, essentially. They're pretty straightforward. Yeah, very powerful and a great way to get your head inside an idea.